Today we're joined by Labour candidate for Lincoln, Karen Lee. Karen, thank you very much for joining us at the Lincolnite.
Thank you for inviting me.
First of all, because we've asked the same for all candidates standing in the election who have joined us this week, can you explain for us in a few brief sentences why people in Lincoln should turn out to vote for you on June the 8th?
I think people should vote for me. I'm the local candidate. I've got a proven track record of success. I was born and bred in Lincoln, and I still live and work in Lincoln. And we've spent a huge amount of time out on the doorsteps in Lincoln, and people are telling me that they think it's time for a change. People are telling me things that they're worried about, and I think that Labour policies are the policies that will address those things that they're bringing up.
What sorts of things in particular have people been telling you that worry them?
A big deal is investment into Lincoln. And I think that Labour's Transformation Fund, £250 billion over 10 years, I'd like to see some of that money come to Lincoln. We want better road and rail links. We want jobs coming to Lincoln so that people will have better jobs. They can access training. Another big deal for people in Lincoln is housing, affordable housing. As you probably know, there are over 1,600 people on the waiting list for housing in Lincoln. And whilst the council are building houses, we need more than that. And Labour have pledged to build 100,000 affordable homes every year for 6 years. And obviously, that'll help Lincoln too.
How much of that do you expect to be sort of channelled into Lincoln?
I would want to see as much of that channelled into Lincoln as possible. And I think the final thing as well, and it's a real biggie, the abolition of tuition fees. Labour have pledged to abolish tuition fees. There's a lot of students in Lincoln. I think that's really important. We've also said that we'll reinstate educational maintenance grant, and again that's important because it means that children from all kinds of backgrounds can access university, because my daughter went to university, she was lucky she went to university, and I want all kids to have that opportunity.
So some important issues there, both in Lincoln and nationally. It's the first time you've stood for the MP position in Lincoln, and your main competition is defending Conservative Carl McCartney. He holds a particularly low majority, but if the results of the county council elections are anything to go by, you still have a difficult task on your hands. Will Lincoln change its allegiance on June the 8th?
I hope it will, and at the end of the day, you know, the only poll that matters is the one on June the 8th. We're out on the doorsteps and we really are getting a very, very positive response to Labour's policies, to Jeremy Corbyn's policies, and to me, I have to say, to me as a local person.
Is Jeremy Corbyn on your leaflets out of interest?
He's not on my leaflets are local leaflets, because in this election people get to vote for me, but I absolutely support him, and the message that I'm getting on the doorstep that people like him and they like his policies.
Sure, a lot of voters obviously will be voting for leadership in the contest, so you see that as a good thing for the Labour Party?
I think it's absolutely a good thing, and I have to say as well, bringing it round, when you think of the recent few days, the debacle on social care costs, I don't think that Theresa May is a particularly strong or stable leader. I think she's coming across as weak and wobbly.
And you see Jeremy Corbyn as a strong and stable leader, and you would sort of back him as leader if results don't go the way that Labour wants them to?
Absolutely, I think he's strong and stable, and I think he's a man of huge integrity, and I'm proud to stand on a Labour manifesto.
Clearly some candidates are still distancing themselves from him, so obviously it's a fair question, and you're there with him and you back
That's
him.
not what I'm getting on the doorstep though. It seriously isn't. People like him and they like his policies. I think sometimes you have to listen to what people say and not always what you read in the media.
You think he's been given a tough treatment in the media?
Yes, I do.
Why so?
I just think at times, sometimes it's not fair. When you think of what happened with Michael Gove and Philip Hammond, I think that sometimes that the treatment that people receive in the media isn't fair. But it's about policies, and this interview is about my policies.
So you think he's been given an unfair sort of treatment in the media, and specifically?
As I said, it's about policies, and this is about my policies.
Let's talk about the NHS. It's a subject that you'll be familiar with given your career as a nurse. At a time when recruitment is a massive challenge, A&Es are being scaled back, ULHT has been placed back in special measures, and this is also in the aftermath of a large-scale cyber attack which crippled outdated computer systems in the county. What solution is Labour offering?
We're putting in a huge amount of money into the NHS over the next 5 years. Money that I would say is desperately needed. All the things that you mentioned, I see that every day. There's a chronic shortage of nurses and doctors. One of the things that I'd campaign for straight away if I was elected would be to have a medical school in Lincoln. ULHT is the largest trust not to have a medical school attached to it. We should have a medical school. We should bring those doctors to Lincoln to train, and we should keep them once they've trained. But with regard to the cyber attack, you know, If we'd had the proper investment into the NHS, lots of these things wouldn't be happening. And with regard to going into special measures, myself and my colleagues, we worked really, really hard. And I know they worked incredibly hard after the cyber attack. And I would defend all those people. You know, and we're working against a background where we've had our pay capped, you know, and we're living with falling standards in wages. I think we do really well in the NHS, and only Labour, it's the only party that the NHS is safe with. Just
remind me where the funding for this is all coming from and how it's all going to be funded.
I have a list here of how we're going to pay for it. The biggest single thing will be a reversal of the cuts to corporation tax. At the moment in this country, corporation tax is set at around 20%, whereas in different countries such as Italy, Germany, France, it's 30 and 33%. It's ridiculously low in this country. And I'm afraid that because it's so low, we don't have the money to put into public services. We need a fair taxation system.
So how much funding will directly come to Lincolnshire from those proposals, do you think?
I don't know those figures directly for Lincolnshire. I have the costings as a whole, what we want to do and how that is costed. And obviously, if I become the MP, that's the sort of thing that I would find out.
And of course, you said that more funding would help with the recruitment crisis in Lincolnshire. How specifically would that help? What would be channelled into that?
Well, reversal of the scrapping of nursing bursaries. In 2002, I started my training. I was a single mum and I needed a bursary. I couldn't have trained to be a nurse without that bursary. It's really important that we have bursaries, as it's important that we have decent wages, and capping wages in the way that they have been capped in the public sector has just put people off, and they can't afford to stay.
What's your view on the ongoing sustainability and transformation plan being undertaken in Lincolnshire? Are those proposals a benefit to patients?
In my view, they're not, no. Okay. Labour's pledged to scrap those.
Can you explain why you hold that view?
They talk about putting more care into the community, but there's no detail about the funding. I just look at the way the NHS is now, and I just don't see them as a positive thing.
Trust bosses might argue that plans are driven by affordability and intentions to improve the quality for services. This is what we're being told by sort of leaders of trusts at the minute. Would Labour's interference in STPs put patients at risk, as some have suggested?
I don't think, when you talk about affordability, if we had a fair taxation and the amount of money went into the NHS that it needs to run properly, then we wouldn't be in the position that we're in now.
But obviously, the plans themselves are intended to, as like we've heard from many, to streamline the actual the service that's given out at the minute as well, as an addition to affordability as well.
I don't agree.
So you disagree with that?
I completely disagree.
Moving on to the subject of policing, according to Labour's police officer number calculator, Lincolnshire has lost 144 police officers in 2010. How many more officers is Labour proposing to recruit in Lincolnshire?
As a whole, Labour are going to recruit an extra 10,000 police officers. In Lincolnshire, I would have to find out what those numbers are.
And what do you think is required in the county?
I would have to speak to police officers who have that sort of information, that sort of detail. We certainly need more police officers on the beat, that's for sure. And I know as a councillor in Carhome Ward, I know that the numbers of police have gone down. Our policing forum, we have that in line with our Carhome Community Forum, and I know that they're struggling.
And again, this is sort of more spending sort of being proposed by the party. How is it going to be paid for? And do the figures include inflation and pay increases?
Well, again, it's reversals of tax cuts. That's how we're going to pay for things. And a Robin Hood tax on financial transactions, taxing fees on private schooling, all that sort of thing.
Now, as you mentioned at the beginning, Labour has also promised this week to bring forward its pledge to scrap tuition fees across the UK. What commitment are you offering to students of Lincoln, where the city's two universities contribute significantly to the local economy?
Well, I'm offering them what the Labour Party's offering them, the abolition of student tuition fees, and I'd be at the front there campaigning for them to get it to happen as soon as possible. The universities that we've got, the two universities, are a huge plus for this city.
So is the tuition fee cut worth the extra cost to the taxpayer when it appears that fees so far have done little to disrupt the ever-growing number of young people choosing to take up a degree?
I think it's absolutely right, because those people leave university with crippling amounts of debt, and it shouldn't be like that.
And it's not sort of hampering that at the minute, like I say, the rising tuition fees.
Yeah, but they're leaving with massive amount of debt, and I just think that university education, it should be about ability and not about ability to pay.
Speaking of students, there have been a couple of reports made on social media that you once referred to students in Lincoln as a disease. Can you clarify the context of these comments, or can you deny making them for the record?
I absolutely deny making them.
So you completely deny that was
I absolutely deny
made?
making any comment like that. In fact, I've actually represented and helped students. Last year there was a problem in the street where I live. There were two lots of students, and one of them were making life a misery for the other lot. And I actually went into City Hall to the ASB team and sorted that out. I have never made any such comment.
Obviously, the comments that have been published on social media, so you would say that those are completely untrue?
I would, and I think it's reprehensible that people make comments on social media and hide behind false names. I think that's really reprehensible.
Of course, as a ward councillor, you have previously made complaints about, on the record, about the noise issue in the West End, where you yourself live, and you've had a big role in the restrictions on student housing brought through the City Council in the area. Can you honestly say you embrace students in Lincoln and particularly in the West End?
Absolutely, absolutely. And do you know what? It's about being considerate neighbours. That's what it's about. I mean, I started the Car Home Gala, and that's to bring all of the community together. The students are as involved as the local community. I'm committed to that. I'm not anti-student.
And you agreed with me there when I mentioned the noise complaints.
I have complained about noise, and I would have complained about that noise if it had been somebody who wasn't a student. That's not the issue. It's the noise that's the issue, not if the person who makes it is a student.
Okay. Moving on to a subject that's been hotly debated throughout campaigning, what is the party's official stance on Brexit?
We want to get the best Brexit deal that we can. We want to retain access to the single market. We want to keep things like workers' rights, consumers' rights, environmental protections. We want to make sure that EU nationals here are protected and we get reciprocal rights for people who want to live in EU countries. I absolutely go with that. And I would point out as well, in the East Midlands, we have £8.2 billion worth of exports every year, and they're reliant on the EU, and I think it's really important that we protect that.
How did you vote in the referendum?
I voted to remain.
Okay, so you voted to remain,
Absolutely.
but you will back getting a good deal for
Absolutely.
people.
And the thing is as well, you know, as a politician, you always accept the result of a vote, of a referendum or an election. You just can't take part if you don't accept. You can't say, oh, let's do it again so I get the result that I want. It doesn't work like that. We'll take forward the will that was expressed last year, but we'll do it in a really calm and sensible way, a negotiated way. It's no good doing what Theresa May says and storming in like a playground bully and saying, right, I want this, and if I can't have it, I'm not going to play. It just doesn't work.
So going forward, say we're looking at a package of what's in an acceptable deal for you, would you support a second referendum?
No.
Okay, so and that's not, so you would want to go forward with the plan as it is, and you wouldn't support
I think that the information that people got last year wasn't always the best information. I don't think it was always accurate or well represented, but we made a decision and we need to move forward on that decision. That's the Labour Party position, and it honestly is my position as well. I'm a politician. You can't just keep rerunning things until you get what you want. It don't work like that.
And what about the people who joined you in that Remain vote in Lincoln who may want a second referendum?
That's our party policy. They'll have to make that choice, but I'm sure they'll agree with me. It's about getting a good deal and getting the best deal.
So as a nurse, what would you say to your EU colleagues who we've been told by ULHT CEO Jan Soburai that feel rejected and are thinking of leaving?
I can understand why they'd feel like that, but I want them to know that Labour will protect them and we want them to stay here. I know some of them actually. I know some of the girls who've come over, and absolutely.
So is that something that you found through your work and through your colleagues? Are you seeing
to be honest,
that
I haven't.
No.
To be honest, I don't dispute that. You know that people have said that, but I haven't found that. No.
So another issue that's prevalent here in Lincoln is poverty. Just looking at residents' reliance on food banks alone, there's been a staggering increase in the demand in the last year. So much so that food banks today are telling us that they are not being able to meet that demand and are having to tap into their own pockets to pay for more food. What do you think is the cause and the solution to this?
Well, you're absolutely right about food banks. Last year, 2,400 emergency food packs were given out in Lincoln, and almost half of those went to children. As you perhaps know, I've done quite a lot of work on the impact of poverty on Lincoln residents. I think it's all about the austerity measures. And we've not got a fair taxation system. How can it be fair that rich people have been rewarded with tax cuts when other people are using food banks? And apparently, including nurses. How can that be fair?
So what's your position going forward then? How is it going to be solved?
I think we need a fair taxation system. We need the way to help people out of poverty, if they're able to work, is to give them jobs that pay them a decent rate of pay with secure contracts, not 0 hours contracts. And it's about providing all of that and helping them to help themselves and help themselves out of poverty.
Now, we've got time for one final question. Homelessness is also a stringent issue in Lincoln. How is that going to be tackled under a Labour MP, considering your position on the City Council as well?
I think there are two things. It's about the provision of more housing, which we've already talked about, and it's also about having somebody whose special role is mental health. I think mental health is sometimes a Cinderella part of the NHS, and I think it needs a much higher profile and it needs investment, because a lot of people who are homeless do have mental health problems.